Welcome to Caledonia Sleeps, your peaceful escape into the heart of Scotland. Tonight, we will journey together through the history of the Loch Ness Monster, not with searchlights and sonar, but with quiet curiosity and the soft glow of the fireside. We will wander through medieval tales and modern mysteries, through folklore and photographs, through the human need to believe in something just beyond the edges of what we know. So settle in, let the fire keep you warm, let the world outside grow quiet, and let us begin our journey into the deep, mysterious heart of Loch Ness. The mist hangs low over the water, thick and silver. It rolls across the surface of Loch Ness in slow, drifting waves. Beneath it, the loch lies dark and still, a ribbon of water stretching 23 miles through the Great Glen, carving Scotland nearly in two. We stand on the shore near Urquhart Castle, its ancient stones grey against the twilight sky. The pebbles beneath our feet are smooth, worn by centuries of Highland weather. The air smells of peat and fresh water, of pine trees and damp earth. Somewhere in the distance, a curlew calls out, its cry long and mournful across the gathering dusk. Look out across the water. The far shore is barely visible through the mist, a shadow of hills and forest merging into evening. The surface of the loch is like dark glass, reflecting nothing but the fading light of day. And below that surface lies depth, unimaginable depth, 230 metres at its deepest point, deeper than the North Sea in places, holding more fresh water than all the lakes of England and Wales combined. This is Loch Ness, ancient, vast, unknowable. And somewhere beneath these dark waters, if the stories are to be believed, something moves, something that has captured imaginations for nearly a century, something that has drawn seekers, scientists and storytellers from every corner of the world. Before we speak of monsters, we must understand the loch itself. For Loch Ness is not simply a body of water. It is a landscape perfectly designed to hold mysteries. The Great Glen Fault runs like a scar across the Highlands, a geological weakness formed hundreds of millions of years ago when tectonic plates ground against one another. During the last ice age, massive glaciers carved along this fault line, gouging out a trench so deep that even now, thousands of years later, it holds more water than nearly any other lake in Britain. Loch Ness is long and narrow, 23 miles from end to end, yet never more than 1.5 miles wide. Its surface sits 52 feet above sea level, But below that surface, the water plunges deeper and deeper and deeper. At its deepest point, near Urquhart Bay, the loch reaches 230 metres, deep enough to submerge Edinburgh Castle twice over, deep enough to hide almost anything. But depth alone does not make a mystery. It is the darkness of the water itself that truly sets Loch Ness apart. The hills surrounding the loch are covered in peat, that thick, dark soil formed from centuries of decaying plant matter. When rain falls in these hills, it washes through the peat, picking up particles and tannins that stain the water the colour of strong tea. The result is visibility so poor that you can barely see a few inches beneath the surface. At 9 metres depth, there is no visibility at all. The water becomes an impenetrable darkness. Imagine swimming here. Imagine feeling the cold water close over your head, feeling the light disappear. Imagine knowing that below you, far below, the bottom of the loch lies hidden in perpetual night. Imagine not knowing what might be down there, moving slowly through that darkness, unseen. This is why Loch Ness breeds stories, because human beings are storytellers by nature, and vast unknowns demand to be filled. We cannot bear to let empty spaces remain empty. We populate them with possibility. And there is something else. Loch Ness never freezes, even in the coldest Highland winter, when ice forms on smaller lochs and snow lies thick on the surrounding peaks. Loch Ness remains liquid. This is because of its depth. The water at the bottom stays a constant temperature year-round, around 5 degrees Celsius, and this deeper water circulates upward, preventing the surface from freezing. To those who lived here centuries ago, this would have seemed uncanny, a loch that refused to freeze, a loch that held warmth even in winter. What lived beneath such waters? What kept them from ice? The loch is also prone to strange effects. Mirages form on calm days when warm air sits above cold water, making distant objects appear larger, closer, or distorted. Internal waves, called seiches, move through the water, driven by surface winds, pushing the warmer upper layer out of place. When the water swings back, these internal waves can move floating objects, logs or branches, through the water in the opposite direction to the prevailing wind. Imagine standing on the shore on a perfectly calm day, no wind, no boats, and yet you see something moving across the water, cutting a wake as though swimming. What would you think? What would you see? Loch Ness is a place where the eye can be tricked, where the natural world behaves in ways that seem almost supernatural, where the mind searching for patterns, for explanations, for familiar shapes, might see a long neck rising from the water, when in truth it is only a log, a bird, a trick of the light and shadow. But knowing this does not make the mystery disappear. It only deepens it, because even now, even with all our modern understanding, Loch Ness remains vast enough, deep enough, dark enough to hide secrets, and that is where our story truly begins. Long before the name Nessie was ever spoken, before cameras and newspapers brought the mystery to the world, there were older stories, stories of water creatures that lived in the lochs and rivers of Scotland, stories passed down through generations, whispered around peat fires on winter nights. In Scottish folklore, nearly every body of water had its spirit. These were not always friendly. The kelpie was perhaps the most feared, a shape-shifting water horse that appeared on the banks of rivers and lochs, beautiful and glossy-coated, seeming gentle. Children would be drawn to it, tempted to climb onto its back, but the moment they touched its skin, they would stick fast, unable to dismount. The kelpie would then plunge into the water, drowning its riders in the depths. The kelpie was a warning. Stay away from deep water. Do not trust what seems beautiful and calm. The water holds dangers you cannot see. Some say Loch Ness had its own kelpie, a creature that lived in the dark water, waiting for the unwary. According to some accounts, before the 1930s, when locals spoke of something in the loch, they sometimes referred to it as the kelpie, though written records of this are scarce. It was part of the old way of seeing the world, when spirits and mortals lived side by side, when the boundary between the natural and the supernatural was thin. But the most famous early account comes not from folklore, but from history, or at least from hagiography, the written lives of saints. In the year 565 AD, an Irish monk named Columba was travelling through the land of the Picts, spreading Christianity across what would become Scotland. His journey brought him to the River Ness, which flows from Loch Ness northward to the sea. According to his biographer, Adomnin, writing a century later, Columba came upon a group of Picts burying a man on the riverbank. They told him the man had been swimming when he was attacked by a water beast. The creature had dragged him under, and though others tried to rescue him with a boat, they had only managed to pull his body from the water with a hook. Columba, hearing this, decided to test the beast. He ordered one of his companions, a monk named Lunya, to swim across the river and fetch a boat moored on the far side. Lunya obeyed without hesitation. He stripped off his tunic and plunged into the water. The beast, sensing movement, rose from the depths. It surged towards Lunya with its open mouth, roaring terribly. The Picts on the shore froze in terror, but Columba did not flinch. He raised his hand, made the sign of the cross, and commanded the creature in the name of God to stop. The beast obeyed. It halted as though pulled back by invisible ropes, turned and fled into the deeper water. Lunya swam safely to the far shore, retrieved the boat, and returned unharmed. The Picts who witnessed this proclaimed it a miracle. Some converted to Christianity on the spot, convinced of the power of Columba's God. And the story was recorded, passed down through the centuries as evidence of the saint's holiness and the strange creatures that dwelt in Highland waters. Now we must approach this story with care. Adomnan wrote his account more than 100 years after the event, and stories have a way of growing in the telling. Medieval hagiographies are filled with miraculous encounters with beasts, dragons, and monsters. These tales were often symbolic, meant to show the saint's spiritual authority rather than to record literal events. The account may tell us more about how early Christians understood their faith's power over the natural world than about any actual creature. Skeptics note that water beast stories were extremely common in medieval saints' lives, following well-established narrative patterns. Adomnan may have been adapting a traditional motif to his local setting, attaching it to a landmark his readers would recognise. The water beast could even represent paganism itself, something dark and dangerous that Christianity drove away through divine power. But whatever the truth of Columba's encounter, the story shows us something important. For more than 1400 years, people have spoken of strange creatures in the waters of Loch Ness. The modern legend did not appear from nowhere. It grew from older soil, from older fears and older stories. After Columba, the written record grows quiet. There are scattered mentions over the centuries, though many of these accounts were not written down until after 1933, making them difficult to verify independently. In the 1500s and 1600s, a few accounts speak of large animals seen in the loch. In the 1870s, a man named D. Mackenzie of Balnain reportedly saw something in the water that looked like an upturned boat, wriggling and churning the surface before disappearing at speed. Though this account was not published until 1934, in 1888, a stonemason named Alexander MacDonald saw what he described as a creature like a giant salamander, with stubby legs surfacing near the shore. But these were local stories, known only to those who lived nearby. They did not spread beyond the Highlands. The loch remained remote, difficult to reach, visited only by those who had reason to travel through the Great Glen. That was about to change. In the early 1930s, a new road was built along the western shore of Loch Ness. The A82 connected Inverness in the north to Fort William in the south, cutting through rugged terrain that had previously been accessible only by foot or boat. Trees were cleared, rock was blasted away, and for the first time, travellers could drive alongside the loch with an unobstructed view of the water. More people meant more eyes on the loch, and more eyes meant more sightings. On the 15th of April 1933, according to the account that would later be published, a couple named Aldi and John Mackay were driving along the new road near Abriachan. The day was calm, the loch like glass. Suddenly, Aldi saw something in the water. She called out to her husband to stop. There, less than a mile from shore, the surface erupted in a tremendous upheaval. A creature, enormous and dark, was rolling and plunging, its body resembling that of a whale. Water cascaded around it, churning like a boiling cauldron. The sighting lasted about a minute. Then the creature disappeared in a mass of foam. The Mackays spoke of what they had seen, and word reached Alex Campbell, the water bailiff for Loch Ness and a part-time journalist for the Inverness Courier. Campbell interviewed the couple and wrote an article about the sighting. It was published on the 2nd of May 1933 under the headline Strange Spectacle on Loch Ness. In his article, Campbell used a word that would change everything. He called the creature a monster. It is unclear who first coined the term. Some say it was Campbell himself. Others credit the newspaper's editor, Evan Barron. But once the word appeared in print, it stuck. The Loch Ness Monster was born. The story spread quickly. Other newspapers picked it up. The Daily Mail sent correspondents to Scotland. A circus owner offered a reward of 20,000, nearly 2 million in today's money, to anyone who could capture the beast. The world's attention turned to a remote Highland loch, and the sightings multiplied. In August 1933, George Spicer and his wife were driving near the loch when they saw, according to Spicer, a most extraordinary form of animal cross the road in front of their car. He described it as having a large body, about 4 feet high and 25 feet long, with a long, wavy neck as thick as an elephant's trunk. It moved across the road and disappeared into the undergrowth toward the water. They saw no limbs. Spicer later drew a sketch of what he had seen, and the image looked disturbingly like a prehistoric creature. Some researchers have noted that his description bears a striking resemblance to a long-necked creature featured in the film King Kong, which had been released just months earlier. But whether this influenced what Spicer saw or how he later described it remains a matter of debate. Photographs soon followed. On the 12th of November 1933, Hugh Gray was walking his dog near Foyers when he saw something in the water. He took a photograph. The image was blurry and unclear, showing a dark, indistinct shape. Some claimed it depicted the monster. Skeptics suggested it was a dog with a stick, or an otter, or even a swan. But the photograph that would become the most famous, the most iconic, the most debated, appeared the following year. On the 21st of April 1934, the Daily Mail published a photograph on its front page. The image showed a small head and long neck rising from the water, creating ripples around it. The photograph was credited to a London doctor named Robert Kenneth Wilson, a surgeon, and so it became known as the surgeon's photograph. Wilson claimed he had been driving near the loch when he noticed a disturbance in the water. He stopped, grabbed his camera, and took several photographs before the creature submerged. The image seemed to show exactly what people had been describing: a plesiosaurus-like animal, something from the age of dinosaurs, somehow surviving in the depths of Loch Ness. For decades, the surgeon's photograph was considered the best evidence for the monster's existence. It was analysed, debated, reproduced in books and newspapers around the world. Some experts declared it genuine, others expressed doubt, but no one could definitely prove it false. Not until 1994. That year, a man named Christian Spurling came forward with a confession. He was 90 years old and approaching the end of his life. He admitted that the photograph was a hoax and he had helped create it. The story Spurling told was one of revenge and mischief. In 1933, the Daily Mail had hired a big game hunter named Marmaduke Wetherell to find evidence of the monster. Wetherell returned claiming he had found enormous footprints leading from the shore into the water. But scientists at the Natural History Museum examined casts of the prints and determined they had been made with a dried hippopotamus foot, the kind used as an umbrella stand in Victorian homes. The Daily Mail publicly ridiculed Wetherell, humiliating him. Furious, he decided to get revenge. Wetherell enlisted his stepson, Christian Spurling, who was a sculptor. Together they built a model of a monster's head and neck out of plastic wood and attached it to a toy submarine purchased from Woolworths. They took the contraption to Loch Ness, placed it in the water, and photographed it. The model was tiny, only about 30 centimetres tall, but in the photograph, with no sense of scale, it looked enormous. They needed someone to submit the photograph to the newspapers, someone whose reputation would lend credibility to the hoax. They chose Robert Kenneth Wilson, a respected surgeon who enjoyed practical jokes. Wilson agreed to be the front man. He took the photographs to a chemist in Inverness to be developed, then sold them to the Daily Mail. The hoax worked perfectly. For 60 years, the surgeon's photograph was believed to be genuine. It became the defining image of the Loch Ness Monster, reproduced millions of times, shaping how generations imagined Nessie. When the truth emerged, some felt betrayed, others simply shrugged. Hoax or not, the legend had taken on a life of its own. Nessie was no longer just a creature in a loch. She was an icon, a symbol, a story too good to let die. Even with the surgeon's photograph revealed as a hoax, thousands of people over the decades have reported seeing something in Loch Ness. Not all can be dismissed. Not all are easily explained. Let us listen to some of these voices, these people who stood on the shore or sailed on the water and saw something that stayed with them for the rest of their lives. There was a man named Arthur Grant, a veterinary student, who on the 5th of January 1934 was riding his motorcycle along the Lochside Road late at night. The moon was full and bright. As he approached a bend near Abriachen, something moved onto the road ahead of him. He braked hard. There, in the moonlight, was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. It had a small head on a long neck, a bulky body, and what looked like flippers. It saw him, turned, and lumbered back across the road toward the loch. Grant dismounted and ran after it, but by the time he reached the shore, all he saw were ripples spreading across the water. He later drew a sketch describing the creature as a cross between a seal and a plesiosaur. Skeptics have suggested he may have seen an otter or a seal, their appearance exaggerated by the poor light and the excitement of the moment. In the 1960s, a man named Tim Dinsdale filmed something moving through the water. The footage showed a hump moving steadily across the loch, creating a wake. Dinsdale had been a Royal Air Force engineer, skilled in observation and analysis. He spent years studying the loch, returning again and again. The footage he captured was analysed by photographic experts, some of whom concluded it showed an inanimate object. Others believed it was a boat. Dinsdale himself remained convinced until his death that he had filmed something unknown. There were fishermen who spoke of seeing shapes pass beneath their boats, dark masses moving through the deep water, too large to be salmon or pike. They would not speak of it publicly, fearing ridicule, but among themselves, on quiet evenings, they would share what they had seen. There was a woman visiting from England who sat on the shore with her children on a summer afternoon. The water was calm, the sun bright. She saw what she thought was a log floating near the far shore, but then it moved. It dove under the surface and a moment later reappeared further along, moving with purpose. She watched it for several minutes before it vanished entirely. She told no one for years, afraid of being mocked. There was a bus driver who saw something cross the road in the early morning mist. He slammed on the brakes. His passengers lurched forward. They saw it too, something large and grey, moving with a strange, undulating motion. It disappeared into the bracken before anyone could get a clear look. They reported it to the local paper, but the sighting was dismissed as a trick of the mist. These are not the accounts of fools or liars. These are ordinary people going about ordinary lives who saw something that defied explanation. Were they mistaken? Perhaps. Did they misidentify something mundane? Possibly. But the sincerity in their voices, the detail in their descriptions, the way they return again and again to that moment, suggests something real happened to them, even if what they saw was not what they believed. And there is a curious pattern to these sightings. They often occur in calm weather, when the loch is still and visibility is good. They happen more frequently near Urquhart Bay, where the water is deepest. They are brief, rarely lasting more than a minute or two. The creature, whatever it is, does not linger. It surfaces, moves, and disappears, as though it prefers the darkness below. The witnesses describe different things. Some see a long neck, others see humps. Some report a head like a horse, others like a snake. Some see something moving through the water, others see something crossing the land. The descriptions do not always match, which has led skeptics to argue that people are seeing different things, mundane things, mistaking them for a single unknown creature. But perhaps that is the nature of glimpsing something in poor light from a distance for only a few seconds. Memory fills in gaps. Imagination shapes what the eye only half saw. Two people witnessing the same event might describe it differently based on what they expect to see, what they hope to see, what they fear to see. The human mind is a storyteller. It takes fragments and builds narratives. It takes shadows and gives them form. And Loch Ness, with its dark water and mist and the weight of its legend, is the perfect stage for such stories. From the beginning, the mystery of Loch Ness attracted not only believers, but skeptics. Scientists and researchers came to the loch with equipment and determination, hoping to settle the matter once and for all. In December 1954, a fishing boat called Rival 3 was sailing on the loch when its sonar detected something large beneath the surface. The object kept pace with the boat at a depth of 146 metres, moving with it for 800 metres before contact was lost. The crew could not explain what they had tracked. It was too large to be a fish, too deep to be driftwood. In the 1960s and 1970s, organised expeditions became more common. The Loch Ness Phenomena Investigation Bureau was formed, conducting surface observations for years. They stationed volunteers around the loch with cameras and binoculars, watching the water for hours each day. They documented many sightings, most of which turned out to be birds, boats, or waves, but a few remained unexplained. In 1987, one of the most ambitious searches ever undertaken was launched. It was called Operation Deepscan, led by Adrian Shine, a marine biologist and long-time Loch Ness researcher, the operation involved 24 boats equipped with sonar. They moved in line across the width of the loch, sweeping the entire length with sound waves, creating a net of coverage that nothing large could escape. The operation lasted several days. Millions of pounds worth of equipment was used, and on 3 occasions, sonar detected large, unidentified contacts in deep water. The signals suggested objects of unusual size, moving at depths between 78 and 180 metres. The strongest signal lasted for 2 minutes and 20 seconds. Darrell Lawrence, a sonar expert who donated equipment to the operation, examined the readings and said, "There's something here that we don't understand, and there's something here that's larger than a fish, maybe some species that hasn't been detected before." But when the boats returned to investigate, the objects were gone. They could not be relocated. They could not be identified. Shine himself noted that the contacts might have been seals that had entered the loch, or debris, or perhaps thermal layers in the water that had created false readings. The 3 contacts remain intriguing, but their true nature is still debated among researchers. Further searches using sonar, underwater cameras, and remotely operated vehicles found nothing definite. The BBC conducted a major sweep in 2003, using 600 separate sonar beams to scan the loch. They found fish. They found the loch bottom. They found nothing resembling a large, unknown animal. In 2018, scientists took a different approach. Instead of looking for the creature itself, they looked for its DNA. Professor Neil Gemmell from the University of Otago in New Zealand led a team that collected more than 250 water samples from all over Loch Ness, from the surface to the depths. They analysed environmental DNA, the genetic material left behind by every living thing that sheds cells into the water. The results were fascinating. They found DNA from many species: fish, birds, bacteria, plants. They found DNA from animals that lived in and around the loch, and they found an enormous amount of eel DNA. Eels were present everywhere in the loch, in quantities far greater than expected. This led Gemmell to suggest the giant eel theory. Perhaps, he said, what people have been seeing is not a prehistoric reptile, but a very large eel. European eels can grow to considerable size, and in the dark, murky water of Loch Ness, a large eel swimming near the surface might look like something with a long neck and body. But Gemmell also found no evidence of reptiles, no DNA from plesiosaurs, obviously, but also none from large reptiles of any kind, no DNA from Greenland sharks or sturgeon or any exotic species that might explain the sightings. We can be fairly sure Gemmell said, that there is probably not a giant scaly reptile swimming around in Loch Ness. So what do the scientists believe? Most agree on a few key points. First, there is no breeding population of large unknown animals in Loch Ness. A single creature could not survive for decades. There would need to be a population, males and females, reproducing over generations. Such a population would leave traces, DNA, carcasses washing ashore, regular, reliable sightings. None of this has been found. Second, many sightings can be explained by known phenomena. Boat wakes create patterns that resemble humps. Logs floating upright look like necks. Otters, seals, and large birds can appear mysterious when seen from a distance. Mirages and optical effects caused by temperature differences in the air can distort objects, making them seem larger or stranger than they are. Internal waves in the water can move objects in unexpected ways. Third, some sightings remain genuinely puzzling. The sonar contacts from Operation Deepscan, the accounts of experienced observers like Tim Dinsdale, the consistency of certain descriptions over decades. These do not prove a monster exists, but they suggest the loch still holds mysteries we do not fully understand. What might explain the sightings if not a monster? Several theories have been proposed. Sturgeon. These large fish can grow to considerable size and have a prehistoric appearance, but they are rare in Scottish waters and have never been confirmed in Loch Ness. Giant eels. As Gemmell suggested, very large eels swimming near the surface could be mistaken for something more exotic. Seals. Grey seals occasionally enter the loch from the sea via the River Ness. Swimming seals can create wakes and humps that look unusual. Floating logs and debris. Wood can become waterlogged and float vertically, creating a shape resembling a neck. Psychological factors. People who visit Loch Ness often expect to see something. This expectation, combined with the power of suggestion and the tendency of the human brain to find patterns, can turn ambiguous shapes into monsters. The truth, most scientists believe, is likely a combination of all these factors. Some sightings are hoaxes, some are misidentifications, some are optical illusions, and some, perhaps, are simply stories that grew in the telling, shaped by desire and imagination. But science, for all its tools and techniques, cannot search every cubic metre of water. It cannot be everywhere at once, and so a small space remains, a gap in certainty, where mystery can still live. Somewhere along the way, the Loch Ness Monster stopped being just a cryptid and became a cultural icon. Nessie, as she is affectionately known, belongs now not only to Scotland, but to the world. She appears on postcards and tea towels, on keychains and fridge magnets. Her image is everywhere in Inverness and the villages around the loch. Shops sell Nessie plush toys, Nessie mugs, Nessie whiskey. There are Nessie-themed tours, Nessie-themed restaurants, even Nessie-themed playgrounds for children. The tourism industry around Loch Ness generates substantial revenue for the region, with estimates ranging into tens of millions of pounds each year. More than 1 million visitors come to the loch, many hoping for a glimpse of the creature. They take boat tours, visit the Loch Ness Centre and exhibition, explore Urquhart Castle with cameras ready. Even those who do not believe in Nessie come for the atmosphere, for the beauty of the Highlands, for the thrill of standing on the shore of a place so steeped in mystery. In popular culture, Nessie has appeared in countless films, books, and television shows. She has been portrayed as a gentle creature, a misunderstood giant, a guardian of the loch. She has been the subject of children's stories and horror films, scientific documentaries, and comic cartoons. She is one of the most recognisable cryptids in the world, alongside Bigfoot and the Yeti. But Nessie is more than a tourist attraction. She has become part of Scottish identity, a symbol of the Highlands, a reminder that Scotland is a land of wild beauty and enduring mysteries. She represents the spirit of a place that has resisted easy explanation, that holds onto its old stories, even in a modern world. There is something deeply appealing about the idea of Nessie. In an age when satellites map every inch of the earth, when technology seems to leave no room for the unknown, the thought that a creature could still be hiding, unseen, in a Highland loch is comforting. It suggests that the world is not yet fully known, that wonder still exists, that there are places where mystery endures. For children, Nessie is often the first introduction to cryptozoology, to the idea that the natural world might still hold surprises. She sparks curiosity, imagination, the desire to explore. How many biologists, how many scientists first fell in love with the natural world because of a childhood fascination with monsters? And for those who live near the loch, Nessie is a neighbour of sorts. Locals speak of her with a mixture of pride and humour. They know the stories, they have heard the debates. Some believe, some do not, but all recognise that Nessie has given them something valuable, a story that the world wants to hear, a mystery that draws people to their home. There is also a certain playfulness to it all. Nessie is not a fearsome dragon. She is not a man-eater. She is elusive, shy, almost gentle. She surfaces briefly, poses for a blurry photograph, and disappears. She plays hide and seek with the world. There is no malice in her legend, only wonder. In many ways, Nessie has become a modern myth, a story that serves the same function myths have always served: to give meaning to the landscape, to connect people to a place, to offer a sense that the world is larger and stranger than we imagine. She is Scotland's dragon, Scotland's sphinx, a riddle with no answer, a question with no solution, and that, perhaps, is exactly as it should be. Why do we want to believe in the Loch Ness Monster? What is it about this particular mystery that has endured for nearly a century, despite the lack of conclusive evidence? The answer, perhaps, lies not in the loch itself, but in us, in the human need for wonder, for mystery, for the possibility of something beyond the ordinary. There is a concept in psychology called pareidolia, the tendency of the human mind to see patterns where none exist. We see faces in clouds, animals in ink blots, constellations in random arrangements of stars. Our brains are wired to find meaning, to recognize shapes, especially shapes that matter to us. Faces, bodies, creatures. This is an evolutionary advantage. It kept our ancestors alive, helping them spot predators in the undergrowth, recognize friend from foe. But it also means we sometimes see things that are not there. A log becomes a neck. Ripples become a creature. Shadows become monsters. When we go to Loch Ness, we go with expectations. We have seen the photographs, heard the stories, imagined what we might see, and so our minds are primed, ready to interpret ambiguous shapes as confirmation of what we hope to find. This does not mean the witnesses are lying. It means they are human. Memory is not a perfect recording. It is reconstructed each time we recall it, shaped by emotion and expectation. A fleeting glimpse becomes, over time, a clear sighting. A dark shape becomes, in memory, a creature with a long neck and humps. But beyond psychology, there is something deeper at work. The Loch Ness Monster speaks to a spiritual hunger, a longing for enchantment in a disenchanted world. We live in an age of science and technology. We have explained so much. We have mapped the genome, explored the solar system, peered into the depths of the ocean and the fabric of atoms. The world, in many ways, has been tamed. The wild places have shrunk. The unknown has retreated. And yet, we miss it. We miss the sense that the world might still surprise us, that there are places we have not yet touched, creatures we have not yet named. We miss the feeling of standing at the edge of the unknown and looking into darkness, not with fear, but with wonder. Loch Ness offers that. It is a liminal place, a threshold between the known and unknown, and modern and the ancient, the mundane and the magical. To stand on its shores is to stand at a boundary, a place where the ordinary world feels thin, where something else might just be possible. There is also comfort in the mystery. The Loch Ness Monster has never hurt anyone. She has never attacked a boat or dragged a swimmer under. She is, in the stories, shy and reclusive. She does not want to be found. She does not want fame or attention. She simply wants to live quietly in the deep water she has always known. There is something gentle about that, something peaceful. In a world full of dangers, real and imagined, Nessie represents a mystery that does not threaten us. She is a wonder, not a horror. And perhaps that is why we want her to be real. Not because we need proof of the paranormal, but because we need to believe that the world is still capable of holding secrets, that not everything can be explained, measured, catalogued, that wildness endures. Loch Ness is also a place of pilgrimage in a sense. People come from all over the world to stand on its shores, to look out across the dark water, to feel the presence of the legend. They come not only to see, but to be part of something larger than themselves, to join the long chain of people who have looked for Nessie, who have wondered, who have hoped. In that sense, the Loch Ness Monster is not just a creature. She is a story we tell together, a shared dream, a collective act of imagination. And whether she exists or not, that story has value. It connects us to the past, to the people who lived here centuries ago and told their own tales of water beasts. It connects us to each other, to everyone who has stood where we stand and felt the same thrill of possibility. And it connects us to the land itself, to this ancient loch that has outlasted empires and will outlast us. In the end, perhaps it does not matter whether the Loch Ness Monster is real. What matters is what she represents: hope, wonder, mystery, the idea that the world is still wild, still unknowable, still capable of surprise. And that is a truth worth believing in. The mist is thick now over Loch Ness. It has swallowed the far shore entirely, and the water close to us is little more than a grey suggestion, rippling gently in the evening breeze. The light has faded and night has slowly crept in. We stand on the pebbled shore, listening to the water lap against the stones. Somewhere across the loch, a bird calls. The sound echoes, lonely and distant before fading into silence. This is a place of stillness, of depth, of quiet. If there is a creature here, she is down there now, far below the surface, moving through darkness that no light has ever touched. If she exists, she has kept her secrets well. For nearly a century, she has eluded cameras and sonar, scientists and hunters, believers and skeptics alike. Perhaps she is there, a survivor from another age, a relic of deep time. Or perhaps she is not a creature at all, but a presence, a spirit of the loch, a shape given form by our longing for mystery. Or perhaps she is nothing more than shadow and light, water and wind, the way the world plays tricks on the eye and the mind. It does not matter, not really, because standing here on this shore, with the mist rolling in and the water darkening, you can feel it, the possibility, the sense that something is just beyond sight, just out of reach, the knowledge that this loch is vast and deep and ancient, and that we, with all our science and technology, are still small and brief and cannot know everything. That feeling is real, whether Nessie is or not. The Loch Ness Monster is a gift Scotland has given to the world, a story that has travelled across oceans and generations, a reminder that even in our modern age, mystery endures, that there are still places where the old stories linger, where the boundary between the known and unknown is thin, where the darkness holds not fear but wonder. So let us leave the loch to its secrets. Let us turn away from the water and walk back up to the shore, leaving the mist and the stillness behind. Let Nessie, whether real or imagined, rest in the deep. And let us carry with us the knowledge that the world is still capable of surprise, that not everything has been found, that some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. The fire is low now, the room is warm. Outside, the night has settled in, cold and dark. But here by the hearth, there is comfort, there is peace. Sleep well, with the knowledge that somewhere in a loch deep in the Scottish Highlands, something might still be waiting, not to be found, but simply to be, and that is enough. And if you enjoyed this journey into the mystery of Loch Ness, if these old stories and modern searchings have brought you comfort or wonder, consider sharing them. like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let the legends of Scotland accompany you through your own quiet evenings. Good night from the fireside. Good night from the Highlands. Good night.